All right. Hello, family. Welcome back. I feel like it's been forever. Got special guest George Nuber here, and we're going to be talking about the the eclipse that everyone's talking about on April 8th. Some interesting things are happening. And so, George, if you don't mind, go ahead and just introduce yourself, your background, what you
Okay.
bring to the table. This is going to be a little more mathematical than things we
Yeah.
talk about. It's going to be over my head. I may need my wife to translate and come up, so I might be having her come up. But this is quite the blessing. And so, thanks for reaching out. And just go ahead and you can tell us a little bit.
Well, thank you for agreeing to doing this together, Josh. It's been fantastic. So, about 2021, my wife and I, Teresa and I, we moved down to Myrtle Beach, away from the Northern Virginia area, just to help us be able to live better and eventually retire. And so that's when we got down here, realized because now we're close to the ocean and it's flat here, and looking out, it's like sea level. It's sea level. It's level. It just hit me like a brick, literally in a second. And
Wow.
so when I realized that, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm pretty old. It's like, man, I wish I would have known this way before earlier in my life. Still doing some architectural design. I designed custom homes, some small commercial buildings. Did quite a few buildings for churches and pro bono sometimes because that was my gift that God gave me, is
Yeah.
design and logic and things like that. So once I knew it came from Him, I wanted to give it back to serve Him. So
Yeah.
I helped different churches, and they would sometimes want to pay me, but I go, no, this is my reasonable service to my Lord and a gift to you, to the church, because that's what you do. You use your gifts that He gives you back to Him.
Yeah.
So then I started, all right, I need to do this myself, do all the investigation. I'm not going to trust somebody else. I started watching, like the flat earthers that basically they know the truth. They know that the earth is a flat, or I call it a circular level plane.
Hmm.
Uh, Not to trigger a bunch of people, but they don't go as far as knowing the creator,
Yeah.
Yahweh. They don't do the biblical part. They just know that there's a dome and it's flat here. So I, bought everything to do that. I bought the Nikon camera. I bought vacuum chambers. About the second law of thermodynamics, where you put two different pressures together, it
Wow.
goes to an equilibrium. I'm going to buy
Yeah.
two more. I'm going to get four together, and
Yeah.
then one will be just a regular earth pressure, and the other three will be, quote, a vacuum, and show that it goes down a quarter percent of 14.7 psi. We are at sea level. Anyway, I'm kind of drifting off. So
That's
with
awesome.
all the tools that I had, I started understanding better and better. Looking at stars, and they're not fireballs. They've got some type of energy. They're all light, and they're flexing, or they got some pulsation going on. And so a lot of deep diving, and so I just keep doing it more and more. And the more that I seek truth, Yahweh blesses, and more
Yeah.
truth will reveal. And it's like, oh my gosh. And that's how I got into the navigation part. I'm trying to understand navigation, and it took me a year and a half. I'm still learning. So now I've learned a lot about that. We're going to talk about that in this presentation tonight, and then the next one tomorrow. So it's just been a joy, and it just so much shows the Creator and
Yeah.
His intelligent design and His perfect design using the laws in the physical realm, right?
Hmm.
He's supernatural, so the supernatural realm is the ether. The ether is, it's basically energy, vibration, and frequency, and that's what Paul talks about. Invisible things,
Yes.
invisible things make visible things. But anyway,
Yeah. I was thinking about that with what they're doing during the day of the eclipse. A lot of people are getting caught up in what the wicked ones are doing, what NASA's doing. And in my opinion, yeah, it's good to understand that because it helps you see that, when we talk about who they are, why they lie, they're doing these things that are evil. They're not naming their missions after characters
oh,
in the Bible. They're
exactly.
naming their missions after sun gods, after deity, Greek deity, after Greek, just like all
Yep.
these different things. And this eclipse is no different. You were sharing, George, on your Facebook page that they had named that the mission that's going to take place during the eclipse, or before, during, and towards the end of the eclipse, is named after a deity, a serpent deity. And I looked it up because I thought, man, this is like, people kept saying this. I kept hearing videos, and I'm like, there's no way they would have a mission, on the last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread for some calendars, named after this serpent deity. And so I looked up this serpent deity because a lot of us don't study ancient history as much as we should, but it's repeating itself. And they're bringing back this ancient Egyptian deity. It says, who embodied darkness and disorder and was thus the opponent of light. And so you have this taking place, three little rockets being launched to study the ionosphere, allegedly. Can't do that from ground level. Signals always bounce off of it, they say. And so this APEP is also known as Apophis. And I heard that word before. I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about this world-ending asteroid, or this asteroid that has the potential to end the world, and they know exactly where it's going to land. And it's called Apophis. And so that's just another name for that APEP snake deity, serpent deity. And when you're reading about it, it sounds a lot like the twisted serpent you hear about in the Bible. And you see the images of it, and that's what it is, this twisting serpent. And so I had my wife, I was like, what's that verse that talks about this twisting serpent? And she was like, oh, it's in Isaiah chapter 27, where it says, in that day, the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, that piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked, I think some translations say twisting serpent. And he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. Well, she pulls up the interlinear. She's real fast at doing this. And she looks at some of the meanings, and she saw the Brown Driver Briggs definition. And it says, when you click on that word fleeing, Strong's 1281 there, it says, of eclipse dragon. And I thought, what are the chances of that? Like, I've never even seen the word eclipse. I don't think it might be in the Bible. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen it.
I've searched for it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah. So there's an eclipse dragon, according to this definition. And I think the reason they call it that is because that's what they believed was causing the eclipses, was their own deities that they worshiped. The crooked serpent was against Ra, their sun god. And so they had this battle of good and evil. So this was their version of Satan, essentially. And that's what NASA is naming their mission over. And so that's sort of like the evilness going on as well. I think I had up there on the screen, CERN is doing their nonsense on April 8th. Yes, it's demonic, but you read Revelation, there is going to be a time where the fallen are unbound. I don't think that CERN has as much to do with it as they think they can. There's angels involved with those things. It's not like mankind can just go, hey, I think I want to just take part and do, what's in the Bible. There's a time and an appointed time for these different things. So what are they doing? Should we be concerned about it? No. It literally says in Revelation, those who have the seal of God, they're not going to be harmed. He cannot harm those who are sealed for the Most High.
That's right.
And so that's what we want to be. We want to get that seal of the Most High. And my wife was just telling me before I came up here that the path of this eclipse is that Hebrew letter. What's it called? The how do you say it? Aleph Tav, or I'm trying to remember. But she said that the meaning of that letter is strong mark, and a lot of people would probably think, oh, mark of the beast, but we need to be marked for the Most High. And this eclipse here is happening on Passover, or not on Passover, at the end of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, depending on your calendar. This is the one that we've settled on. It's the last day is on the 8th. And this is our first time using this calendar and all of that. And I didn't even think about it until I was planning to be out of work. And I was like, wait, that's the day where everyone's watching the eclipse at work. And they're bringing the students outside. And so I thought it was fascinating that the sun is going dark. And it's around, the same time of the crucifixion. When Yeshua was on the cross, the sun went dark. And it went dark from the 6th hour to the 9th hour. And I was like, well, let me just look up and see what time what time sunrise is and when this eclipse starts. And sure enough, sure enough, the eclipse happens around 1:45, which, according to when the sun rises, it's about the 6th hour of the day, and then it stops at about the 9th hour. Not saying this is like that's connected to that, but it's fascinating that it's around that time, depending on what time zone you're in. From the one I'm in, that's the hour of the day it's going to be, and so pretty fascinating.
By the way, those same 3 rockets, they actually went up in October 14th's annular eclipse. I don't know if you knew that, but
No, I didn't.
They did it on October 14th as well. It wasn't as well published, but they did.
Yeah.
And they retrieved the same 3 rockets, apparently.
Yeah, see, I wonder, we're paying for these things and we don't hear about them or see them. It's like I have to find out from some conspiracy video going, hey, they're doing this serpent deity mission. And I'm like, now that just sounds too much like a bogus thing. And no, for real, they're actually really doing that. And I think there is significance. This is some sign for an appointed time, given when it's happening. The direction of these things seem to make no sense. The sun is moving. If you're looking at it from this map here, it moves from right to left. Rises in the east, sets in the west.
Yeah, and
but
it
these
always
shadows,
does.
shadows are not going that direction. They don't make any sense.
Right. So we're going to get into that tonight because that line that it's for the April 8th. I use the navigational data of the United States Naval Observatory for the sun and the moon, and so we can see exactly what's going on, what the truth is, but then we see something else. Okay, so there's truth and deception going on at the same time. And another thing too, I got a huge PDF. I found this paper that had the history of the name of all of NASA's projects. And I'm telling you, it's the satellites. There's other things besides just rockets, like Apollo, a Titan, Thor. All these things. They always name them after false gods. It's nothing new. But even down to the smallest project, they always had it a name with some type of false god. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, sun god after sun god after. It's like they don't have a limit to all these gods that they like to promote.
No.
Yeah, they never name them after biblical things. Yeah. It's always some.
There's a reason for that, right?
There's a reason for that, and the reason why you go to like DC and it looks like Rome and it looks like ancient Greece, and you go to, like these places always look like that for a reason.
Right.
These demons have carried their beliefs, and they're somewhat sentimental about their history. They want you to keep remembering it and repeating it.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. So for anybody just joining in, I see a lot of familiar people in the chat. George is going to be presenting a lot of the math behind the eclipse and how it works on a biblical Earth model. And so if you don't believe in the biblical Earth model yet, this would be a good time to start the investigation with the things that are going on and that are about to happen in the world. We're in times of major deceit. They are ramping up their deceptions, and the technology is getting so good, it's hard to really tell a difference between what's real or not, and especially with all this AI taking over all at once. I mean, this is all at once. It's weird how it's like every time using even these programs are like, would you like AI to create a thumbnail for you? And I'm like, I just used this program a week ago and this wasn't here. And so they're able to do a lot of different things that will probably help them with their next fake moon missions. I think they keep delaying it because they're like, our artificial intelligence and all this stuff is just not quite there yet. And so
it never will be.
Keep pushing it back. Their time's running out. So things are going to happen. It's going to be, it's not going to be the best. We're probably going to see some crazy things happen. I know when the fake New Year happened, there was a lot of earthquakes. I'm wondering if it's going to be the same with the real New Year that we have coming up, the biblical New Year, the first month of the year, or the head month, depending on what you want to call it. But we're right there. It's about to be that time. So this is going to be quite educational. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll try to pop them up if there's a break. And George can answer about his presentation, about his information in regards to things. And so it's going to be very, very informational for a change. Usually it's more like biblical information. This is the math stuff. I cannot verify any of this with my own brain power. And so test all things, prove these things out for yourself.
Yeah.
And like you said, he's got architecture background. So that's one of his gifts, is being able to see these things, the angles of how everything works.
Right.
I would need like I don't know, I'd have to like scale everything down, and it would take a lot for me to come up with some of these conclusions.
Well, all the data that's going to be shown tonight, I encourage anybody to go on the U.S. Naval Observatory website and go to see exactly where these numbers are coming from and check it out, because it's 100% consistent.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, they base all their data on a flat, non-rotating Earth. And you were talking about satellites. I just remembered what I was the thought I had. I was going through CIA documents with the firmament and stuff not that long ago, trying to see if they were still there. And I found one from a long time ago, like pre-moon missions, where they were talking about manned satellites in these declassified documents. And I'm like, manned satellites? Like they had people controlling these things? Why would, if they're just in orbit randomly going around, why would they need someone up there controlling these things if they're not in some sort of balloon or attached to something like?
Yep.
So I thought, man, that's weird. I've never heard of manned satellites. I don't think they were talking about, manned satellites back when Sputnik was being launched, allegedly. So I thought that was interesting. I forgot to share that.
The technology then. That's why they had to do it by them steering the satelloons.
Manned satelloons. That's what they had.
Yep.
They were poor guys up there living for months at a time, I'm sure. Like, I couldn't imagine those conditions back then. Like, we're the first satellites and we're powering them.
It couldn't have been that high up either, because they got to deal with the oxygen level and all that. Yeah.
And they're launching. When you said that, I had a memory from my early days research, like 7 years ago. They're launching from Wallops, which is where they launched Project Echo. And Project Echo was a giant spherical balloon that was like as big as a skyscraper. I mean, this thing was huge, aluminum foil looking balloon. I don't know if you ever saw that, Project Echo. If you guys look up the pictures for that, there's people standing next to this balloon and they're tiny. And their goal was to go 3,000 miles high, which we can't do, inflate it. And so once it's inflated, they'll be able to bounce signals off of a spherical object in a predictable path. I mean, that just seems impossible anyways. And so 3,000 miles up, that little bitty spherical, it looks like a BB. I mean, smaller than that, 3,000 miles, they were going to bounce signals off of it. Well, it came back down to Earth and landed right close to where they launched because it exploded. I'm like, so you're telling me if it had inflated with this hydrogen gas or whatever you had in it, it would have floated, but since it didn't inflate, it fell. And then it landed right where you launched. Like
it didn't change its point. Yeah.
Darn, if it only it had inflated, it would have stayed up there. I'm like, that's not how you've told us that gravity or orbit works. It's not straight up, inflate and stay there. But yeah, so they hadn't figured their story out yet when they launched that one. 3,000 miles above the world. Interesting stuff. But yeah, I'll go ahead. I'll pull up your presentation if you're ready, or if you had anything else to share. Anyone had any questions before we get started? I met George. I don't think I talked about that. I met George back at Flattoberfest last year, and so
it was 2022
or 2022. Yeah, not last year.
It's hard to believe it's that's long ago, but yeah.
Time warps. I'm glad you're here because that seems like last year, but yet.
Yeah, same here.
2022.
Yep.
So wow, you were new to it. You'd only been into it for like a year.
Right.
Year and a half. That's cool.
Well, and I went there because I was looking for Christian flat earthers, and you, Matt, and then Sean Griffin. But when we got there, we realized there's a lot of people that are just they're not based on biblical model. And but I was there to ask questions of how to get, because I felt so driven. Now knowing the truth that I want to share it. And really, when you do this, when you start proclaiming basically the biblical creation model, you are proclaiming setting up the kingdom of God. Understand that down the road, right? You have to have that truth to know about the kingdom of God that's coming later on. So yeah, that was an exciting time for us. So I was asking, what kind of software to use for presentations and things like that. And so I'm slowly learning.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And speaking of that, he's got a channel called Geotruth. It's linked in the description if you want to see his work and his breakdowns. I believe you've got like animations up there that kind of go with this presentation. I don't know if they're public yet, that explain and show and demonstrate some of the things you're talking about.
Right.
So yeah, it's
And
a
so that
learning
was
process.
and my purpose was because a lot of the Christian-based ones for the biblical model, Christian model, always starts with scripture. And that's like, okay, somebody that's an atheist doesn't believe it, they're just going to turn it off right there. So what I try to do, I try to use logic, science first, the true science, real science, and drive them to say, hey, look, this is the truth. Oh, guess what? It's in God's word. So I do it at the end to proclaim the truth through God's word, but up front use logic, science, logic, and things like that. And it's also for the non-believers, and it's also for a lot of believers that still are in the heliocentric model, and and even talking to some people that have relatives, the first time I told them, they thought I was nuts. And then they said, well, what does it matter to me? I said, well, you want to know the truth. That's what matters, And then this person is now a flat earther and delving into the truth. So,
Nice.
praise Yah, right? Praise
Yeah.
Yah.
Yeah. It's been a gateway to deeper truths as well. Once you figure this out, it's like
Right.
you're not content with just knowing something that that's been hidden for a while. It's like you want to know more. You want to know more about the Creator. You want to know more about the Bible. You want to go
Yes.
back to Genesis. Like it's one of those things. Like it's taking people back to Genesis, which has helped give us a good foundation. Like in the New Testament when they were saying, "Study to show yourself approved," and Peter's saying, look at what the prophets are saying. They didn't have the New Testament yet. They didn't have the letters of Paul gathered back together. They didn't have John, the Revelator writing his things. And so they were studying so they could understand why are we getting grafted into this family? Why are these sheep outside of the sheep pen getting brought in? Who were we? We were just Gentiles, like all these different people having these identity crises, thinking they're just, strangers from the promise. And it's like, they go back and they start seeing Paul, this guy speaking, is actually understanding what the prophets were saying. So yeah, it helps give you a really good foundation of the word. And it makes your faith stronger, even if you're a believer. Like I'd already had miracles happen before Earth Truth, and it just takes your faith to another level, like a different level. Your prayers just become more meaningful. It's like how close the Creator is.
Yes,
it's peaceful.
Yes. Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah, Tyler was sharing that. I was trying to see if there was any other questions or anything being shown. I can move that away. Before, when I used to do presentations, I didn't know how to remove the comments. I would do it. They would just stay up there. I'd be talking. So I'm like, one day they're like, you just click it again. It'll go away. So you just click it. I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. So some of my older videos when I was first using StreamYard, there'd just be a comment there the entire video until I figured out you can just click it twice and it goes away. Learning the technology. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pull up your presentation, George, and we can get started.
Yeah, bring up the one that says surface of water first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it, let me see. Is it this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So let me get start.
Yeah, you can go ahead and get started.
Okay. So I thought to start the foundation of the presentation before we get into what's going on in the solar event on April 8th is one of my very first videos that I did on Geotruth, because I believe it's the foundation of really breaking up the whole heliocentric model that the world tells us. If we can prove that the Earth is not a sphere, then it is the whole foundation for the heliocentric model just falls. You don't have to talk about anything else. You don't have to talk about, the telescopes that are going out or anything else, because we've already made the decision through science and observations and testing that the Earth is a circular level plane. The circular level plane basically is the surface of water is level across the entire Earth. And so I just did a quick 6-slide here. It's coming from episode 1, Earth Geometry. And if nobody's seen that, I'd recommend watching it. It's 52 minutes long. It goes into great detail of scientifically showing the truth. I use AutoCAD to show what they say the curvature is on the Earth, and depending how far away you are from one place to the other, the more miles you're away on the Earth, the more the curvature is, and it just totally shows how that's a lie through basically properties of water. So this might be good. This little 5 or 6 slide thing here, I just made it real simple. So I'll just go through this. We'll get through it fast. There are 2 important actions of water which it always performs and is scientifically proven by observation, evidence, and repetition. Action of water number 1. Water always flows downhill or downward from a higher elevation to a lower elevation. The Earth's hydrologic cycle consists of rainwater falling downward from the clouds in the sky to the Earth's land surface and bodies of water. All water on the Earth's surface flows downward or downhill to the oceans through creeks, ponds, lakes, and rivers. Therefore, it is physically impossible for water in creeks, ponds, lakes, rivers, and oceans to flow upward or uphill. And this is the more important action of water number 2. The surface of water always seeks its own level, no matter what the size of the body water contained is by a perimeter barrier, such as a shoreline or a container. Therefore, it is physically impossible for the surface of water to bend or curve. You will never see this taught in any of educational institutions because guess what? They don't want you to go there. They don't want you to realize this. You never see this. Okay. So that's a very good thing. Some of the kids, the parents that know that the Earth is flat, the kids ought to take this and say, why don't you teach about this?
Yeah. Yeah. I had a student asking about, they were debating the flat Earth in class. I did not start the conversation. I've already been talked to many times. I know I can get in trouble for doing that.
Right.
Even though it's scientific, and I'm a science teacher. This was just last week, and it's always the globe believing children that get so angry because you'll have 1 or 2 in your classes that are flat earthers now, and they don't really understand why. They just understand enough to know that they believe it's true, and so when they try to present the evidence to their classmates, they're like, no, and I heard this girl. She goes, no, coach, tell her that it's a globe, that we've known it's a globe, that, and they said, don't you believe it's a globe? And I said, well, and I said, I believe the surface of water is flat and that Earth is just dry land. And she was like, what? And I was like, calm down. It's okay. I said, I used to believe all those things too. I said, I used to believe we went to the moon and just tried to calm them down. And I used the simple analogy of a bullet. I said, imagine if a bullet was fired across the room and you tried to watch it go by. Could you watch it go by? And they're like, no. I said, now, could you imagine life existing on that bullet? And they're like, no. And I said, now imagine it going 288 times faster and moving in a circle. Could you picture you living on something like that? And they're like, no, that's ridiculous. And I said, it is ridiculous. And I said, just what you need to believe is what the Bible says. And it tells you what the world is. I said, that's all you got to do. If you ever get lost, I said, just go back to the Bible and read what it says. I said, that's my belief. I'm not going to force it on anybody, but that's what you can do. And they were like, wow, that makes sense. I understand. You could just see their eyes. When I used the bullet analogy, they were like, that's ridiculous. There's no way we live on something like that,
Right. So toward the end of the episode 1, Earth's geometry, after I go through all this and show that, everything, all water on the Earth is level, wherever container it's in, that then I go back to scriptures and I show that there's 40 scripture verses that talk about the surface or the face of the waters, the face of the Earth. What you're just missing there is the surface in front of the face.
Yeah.
So, so let's go to the next slide. So this is also in this where part of the presentation, these things that you're seeing is from my AutoCAD, because I actually made the Earth the actual size that they tell us it is. So these are the real curve distances, and it does equate to the equation that says it's 0.8 miles times 0.8 squared is roughly the curvature. But this is coming in from actual geometry that I'm using on AutoCAD. Earth's surface curvature in a medium scale, which is between 100 miles to 900 miles in curvature. So you can see at the point of line of sight, there's a level line of sight, and then here's the curvature of the sphere, what they tell us. So each time you go out, the curve gets worse and worse and worse. 300 miles out. Now there's other tables you can see below here, but there's a table that shows where 300 miles, the curvature is 11 miles. Okay. I'm keying on that because next slide is going to be anybody can do this. And again, you can use these short 5 or 6 slides to tell people that don't believe that the water is level and the earth is not curved, because they can go to these websites. So topographic and distance maps. Topographic map, the website below provides elevation above sea level in feet in any location on the earth. And this is basically the United States Geological Survey website, okay? We're going to go there next. But then the other one is a distance map. The website below provides a distance in miles between any two locations on the earth. And you go there, you can click one point on the earth and another one, it'll tell you what the distance is, okay? So these two websites can be used to determine the distance between any two oceanic or lake shorelines and their elevations. So we're going to look at Lake Michigan, okay? Here we go.
Oh, that's cool.
So Lake Michigan's south to north distance is over 300 miles. This is coming off of that. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Let me go back. It's kind of messing me up a little bit. How does it? Okay. Anyway, below the chart, you see that there's the website. So you get on there, and basically I went to the south point of the lake on the water to the north point. And it tells me, I got it in yellow there, 321 miles in length. Okay, so that's 321 miles. All right. So then I go onto the topographic map that will tell me what the elevations are, and I do it at the same 2 points. Now, if the Earth is curved, they shouldn't be at the same sea level number, right? Because there should be 11 miles in difference in curvature there, which, by the way, would mean the lake wouldn't be a lake. It'd be more like a creek because the water is going to flow out of it, right? When you think about the reality of it. So here we go. You can see it's a little hard to see, but you can still see that there's Lake Michigan, and this is the south point. The elevation of the surface of the water at the most south point is 575 feet above sea level. Okay, that's the south point. Now we're going to go check the north. Oh, gee, look at that. Look at that. This is anybody can do this. So what's that tell you? It tells you all that water, the whole area in Lake of Michigan, around the perimeter on the shoreline, it's level. It's not curved. I mean, this is a simple thing to do, and you can do that. You can go on the, it goes, like I said, anywhere in the world, and you can go on any oceanic shoreline in different countries, and it's got zero elevation at the shoreline. Anywhere you go, there's no curvature. Okay, so this is logical. I mean, and scientific. So surface of water across Lake Michigan is level. The south to north distance of Lake Michigan is over 300 miles. The elevation of the surface of water across Lake Michigan from south to north is 575 miles above sea level, showing no curvature at all. However, according to the size of the Earth's sphere, a distance of 300 miles requires the Earth to have 11 miles of curvature. The Earth is a circular level plane with all oceans at sea level, with land masses at various elevations above sea level and ocean floors at various elevations below sea level. Very simple, short slide thing for people to use to try to show people more, reality. And once you do this, you don't need to talk about anything else. The whole foundation of the heliocentric model has been blown apart. You don't have a ball. You don't have a ball, so the ball can't spin. So there's not moving. Then what's that cause? Well, then how's the sun and the moon go around? Oh, then you start digging into that. So I thought I'd share that as a premise before we get to the meat of the presentation, which is going to be the next one about what the solar event is on April 8th.
Sweet. Yeah, that's cool. That just reminds me of my early days of research talking about water going to the ocean. They made a massive, I guess, replica of the Mississippi River. I was watching this thing and they're trying to see how, the water flows to the sea. And they made this giant map of it, topographical map. It was 3-dimensional and it took up this whole room and they didn't factor in curvature and they put water on it and it ran just like it does in reality. Everything went downhill to the ocean and the river flowed the way it does. There was no
actually in that episode 1, Geotruth, the Earth's geometry, I actually go into that too, showing about, where it starts at. It starts at a lake, And it's going downhill all the way to basically the Gulf of Mexico. And based on the distance of the curvature, you would have to, I show a graphic of that, you'd have to have the water go uphill for about 50 miles before it could go downhill because of the curvature.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, it's just, when you start thinking about it, and people will use the G word for why it's a globe, but you can't go there. You have to go here to show the truth about water never bends. The surface of water never bends or curves.
Yeah, you can bank on that when you go to shoot line of sight signals. I mean, Guglielmo Marconi back in 1901 shot one 2,100 miles line of sight,
Right.
and it didn't bounce off the ionosphere, like they claim, because it would have been like so many bounces, and there would be dead spots, evenly predictable dead spots, if it was bouncing off of the ionosphere, and it's not, the signal can be detected anywhere in between those distances. And now, of course, that was 1901. We've gone from England to Australia. And no matter how far you go, it's like that's refraction. And it's like we're literally going all the way around the ball, and you think it's just zigzagging off of the ionosphere.
Right.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
All right. Did you want me to pull up the other presentation?
That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay.
This is the meat. This is the meat of the presentation for part one. Yep, that's it.
Okay.
So the April 8th, 2024 solar event, this is part one. We're going to do another second part because there's too many slides to go over in one presentation. So what I'm going to do here, I'll explain more. There's some graphics that are either side of this, the sun being covered up, but we're going to get into it in the presentation. So the April 8th, 2024 solar event, United States Naval Observatory Astronomical Data Service, NASA, and Mainstream Science state the following solar event will occur on April 8th, 2024. This is right off of their website. On the April 8th, 2024, a total solar eclipse will be visible to fortunate observers in the United States along a narrow band, approximately 115 miles wide, that will cross 15 states from Texas to Maine. And there's the website link that states that. NASA Mainstream Science's definition of a solar eclipse. A solar eclipse occurs when the moon passes between Earth and the sun, thereby obscuring the view of the sun from a small part of the Earth, totally or partially. Such an alignment occurs approximately every 6 months during the eclipse season, when it's a new moon phase. And I underlined that and bolded it because new moons, anytime an eclipse occurs, it's always on a new moon phase. Okay. However, all solar eclipses occur during a new moon phase when the moon has no light, is invisible, and is closer to the sun. Quote, total solar eclipses occur only at locations where the moon and sun altitude angle and azimuth angle are exactly the same. Now we're getting into some geometry. This causes the moon to geometrically appear to be exactly in front of the sun to block the sun and the sun's light. Based on scientific observations of the sun and moon through a full lunar cycle, the moon is a light and not a mass. And this link here is, I did a whole playlist back in September to October. Every day I was going out and taking pictures and videos of the sun and the moon, and basically showing in different phases when the moon was losing its light. It is just light, that you could see it, literally the surface of it disintegrating, and it's invisible wherever that light was. So there's a whole playlist for the whole cycle, a 29.5 day cycle, explaining what's really going on. So if anybody really wants to get into that, it's truth right there. For thousands of years during solar eclipses, a black orb phenomena is observed moving in front of the sun, posing as the moon. 4 total eclipse locations on April 8th, 2024 will be researched in this presentation. And here they are. So we're going to look at, so we know the eclipse is starting down in Texas and going really up northeast. So we'll look at Waco, Texas, Indianapolis, Indiana, Erie, Pennsylvania, Sherbrooke, Canada. So we're going to go through each one of these. So I'm going to go through a process, and this process is going through and using the navigational data and then relating that geometrically of what's going on. So once we get, I'll be fairly slow going through the process for Waco, Texas, but I think after that, if you all understand what I'm doing, it's the same process for the other 3 locations. So the first thing to do is to obtain the latitude and longitude coordinates and elevation. So I just got on, Google Maps, basically. That showed me what the elevation was in Waco, Texas. And then I used this lat-long location to tell me the latitude and longitude. So there's the information I needed. Waco, Texas, latitude and longitude, elevation. So now take that, and you can get on this Solar Eclipse computer. You can actually get on there. There's the website for it. So you go to this link, input the data, and you get the data. And so the results come out that, and I boxed them in with the black boxes. The maximum eclipse is 1840 universal time. I use universal time because that's Greenwich meridian, so it kind of keeps everything on the same time depending on where you are on longitude. So sun's altitude is 65.9 degrees, which you can see here, right there at 65.9 degrees. The azimuth is 186. So I've got that information. I'm going to verify that because on the Naval Observatory data website, they also have where you can look at sun and moon's altitude and azimuth angles, and it should be exactly the same on that data set as it is here. So that's where I'm going to go next, is to input that data. So now this is for the sun and moon altitude and azimuth angles. What I did is I pulled them together, data source. This is coming from altitude and azimuth of the sun or moon during one day. So I use this for both the sun and the moon, and it did show up with that same latitude, longitude, and the time. Sun again shows that exact altitude angle and azimuth angle. But look what happens. The moon, when I did it to find for the moon, it's exactly the same. And yes, the moon, it's a new moon, 0% illumination, 0% light. So the altitude and azimuth angles of the sun and moon are exactly the same. This causes the moon to geometrically appear, quote, appear to be in front of the sun. However, the moon is in its new moon phase, has 0% illumination, as invisible. That'll keep coming up, okay? So next step. And this might be hard for people to see, I hope not. So what I did is I'm trying to show you the angles, the azimuth angle, altitude angle, and view, okay? So the on the left is the sun and moon azimuth angles, and azimuth angles are always it's a circular angle that's pretty much on the horizon. It's on the level plane from north center, so it goes 186 degrees, okay, which makes sense because Waco, Texas is going to be looking south at it. So there's the location of the moon, which is in front of it, the sun. I hope people can see that. Can you see that, Josh?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. And now the next view over the middle one is the altitude angles. Sorry, that slide number. Are you guys seeing that slide number, or is it out not being seen by you?
Yeah, that's number 8. Is it? Is that right?
Is there a way for me how do I hide that a little bit? Because it's getting in the way of the picture.
Oh, the where it's showing how many people are viewing and stuff?
Yeah.
They don't see that. We see it, but they don't.
Okay. So anyway, the middle is the altitude angle from the horizon. And see, now they're both 65.9 degrees. So it makes the moon right in front of the sun. All right. So they have both azimuth and altitude angles. So when you look at the view on the right, this is what people at Waco, Texas are seeing, right? They would see the moon exactly geometrically in front of the sun. This is the only way it can happen to make it look like something's moving in front of the sun. The altitude and azimuth angles of the sun and moon are exactly the same. The moon is perfectly geometrically aligned in front of the sun. All right. So that is true. Okay. They are aligned together. So now we're going to actually find the actual location of the sun. So I have to go back into the navigational data. And again, this takes me a little bit of time, but I have to find it where the sun is exactly 90 degrees above in a latitude location. So I found that it's plus 7.59. That's that center row, and it says that the altitude is 90 degrees. So it's right above that latitude and that longitude at minus 99.59. So this data, again, comes, and you all can check this out. You can take all this information at the top of the title here and plug it in, and you'll get this information, okay? And then, so based on that information in previous presentations I've done with the navigational data actually told through that and double triangulation, we actually know that the sun's altitude above sea level is 3,107 miles. And later on, we'll see what it is for the moon. And it always is that. The way this data, the table below, the second table below, there's a lot of information here that I'm just going to kind of go over, kind of skip over. But miles per degree latitude on a latitude line, on a latitude on a longitude line, if you stay on that longitude line, 1 degree of latitude equals 69.05 miles. So now we've got distances, real distances, okay? And so since I've got three locations, it tells me that on the top one, the plus 52.59, that is north of the sun, and the plus 7.59, that's where the sun is directly over. So that difference between the two is 45 degrees of latitude. And 45 degrees times 69.05 is 3,107 miles. And you do the same thing on the latitude south. The minus 37.41 is south of the equator. And then again, the distance between plus 7.59 and minus 37.1, again, is 45 degrees latitude. So we got double triangulation going on here with the isosceles right triangle. And then we get same number, 3,107 miles. And we'll show that next. Here is the geometric aspect of that, where we use, you're going south and north of the sun. So I'll just say in the middle here, the sun is right here. Vertical altitude is 3,107 miles. It's at plus 7.59 latitude, which is 90 degrees altitude, directly above. And then we go north 45 degrees, which is 3,107 miles, and is that latitude point, plus 5.259. The altitude angle is 45 degrees, and it's 180 degrees azimuth. In other words, it's right on the longitude line. That's how we know these are perfectly lined up. They're going to be on the longitude line. They can't be off of it. It's how it's geometrically lined up, horizontally and vertically. And then if we go south to the minus 37.41 latitude, we're still looking north. Now it's 360 degrees azimuth, but it's right on the longitude line. We got 3,107 miles. So it's the double triangulation. This occurs all the time, every time, wherever you try to locate the sun. If you do this, you go 45 degrees of latitude north or south of it on the same line. You'll get the same elevation. It never changes. So then we'll do the same thing for the moon, okay? And so what happens with the moon, it's not quite, but it's the same thing. But the latitude, look where it's at 90 degrees, plus 8.00. And let me go back to where the sun was. The sun is at plus 7.59. So you see the moon's a little bit north of the sun. That's why Waco sees the moon in front of the sun, all right? And then when we do this, we still geometrically, we're looking at trying to get that 45 degree angle, altitude angle, north or south of where the moon is, directly 90 degrees above, okay? So that happens to be, when you look at it here on the table below, we know that the moon's directly above at plus 8 latitude. But then the latitude north of that, that's 45 degrees away, is plus 52.34. So now the latitude difference is only 44.34 miles, not 45, which will make it less altitude because we still use a 69.05. So when we do that, the moon is at 3,062 miles above sea level, or actually 45 miles below the sun. And you can see again with the double triangulation going south, the minus 36.34 and the plus 8 is the same, 44.34 degrees, 60 times 69.05. So we're getting double triangulation. Now we know this happens all the time on all the data. Wherever you can find the moon, straight up, if you go out, that latitude difference is going to be the same elevation. All right. And then here it is again, geometrically shown with the, basically we're using isosceles right triangles, both north and south. So that's how we get double triangulation. And that tells us that the moon is 3,062 miles above, and it's 0% illuminated. Okay. So all these things are geometrically perfectly aligned up so that the moon is in front of the sun. It is. It's just totally invisible because it's a new moon, no light. So now we'll locate them. Now we can locate them. This is pretty cool. This is what Waco, Texas. You can see the line, and this is pretty much going to be the line that they show, that angled line going from south to north, kind of in a northeast way. But the moon is white, is shown as white, but it's invisible, and then the sun is yellow. Okay, it's pretty much with all the navigational data we've actually located on the true Gleason's map circular level plane to show what's exactly going on. Okay, but now, so what happens if we start looking at other points? And that's what we're going to do. We're going to start looking at an observation point south of where the sun and moon are. We're going to start at the equator, and then we're going to go out to minus 15 degrees latitude and 30. So I'll show this. Okay, there it is. That's going to be our next observation point. Okay, so we're going to look south now and see what happens, because on the other side at Waco, Texas, is obviously perfectly lined up. But well, wait a minute. But if we look at on the back side, the sun's going to be higher than the moon, so the moon should be visible, right? It's not in front of the sun. So what I'm doing now is I have to go into the navigational data and get the azimuth, altitude and azimuth points. So we're going to look at latitude 00, which is the equator, and minus 101 longitude. Let me go back. So that's where we're at. That spot there that we're going to look at observation point 1, that's its location, latitude and longitude. Okay. So I've got the data points now through the navigational data that the sun's altitude angle is 82.3 and azimuth angle is 10.4. The moon's is a little bit lower, right? It's going to be 81.7 and the azimuth angle is 10.1. Still showing the moon 0% illuminated and it's invisible. So now the altitude and azimuth angles of the sun and moon are not the same. The moon is not perfectly aligned geometrically with in front of the sun. If the moon is a solid mass, then the moon should be visible. Okay. And here we go. I'm doing the same perspectives again. On the left, that's the azimuth angles from true north at that point on the equator. So you can see that the sun is a little bit farther out from north center than the moon. They're not perfectly lined up. Then we look at the altitude angles. The moon, because we know the moon's always lower than the sun based on the navigational data. So we see a separation. Now, that person looking at that point on the latitude and longitude line on the equator there, the moon is below the sun. Okay. So if that's the case, then you could still see the moon, even if it was a mass. Now it's not blocking the sun. You could use double filters or double sunglasses, whatever you want. You know, I'd use double filters on my Nikon camera. And if it's a mass, it should see something there, because guess what? The moon should still be reflecting off it somewhere, right? So here we go. The altitude and azimuth angles of the sun and moon are not the same. The moon is not perfectly geometrically aligned in front of the sun. So if the moon is a solid mass, then the moon should be visible. However, during a new moon, the moon has 0% light, is invisible, and therefore not a solid mass. So we're going to go through there's two other observations farther south. Point 2 now, we're minus 15 degrees out. Okay, So I'm going to go a little bit quicker because I think if you understand what we're doing now, and obviously when you think about it, if we're going farther away, then we're staying on the same longitude of the line, but the altitude angles will go down for both of them, right? And we'll see that. So the data for that -15 latitude to -102 longitude, the sun's altitude angle is 67.3, azimuth angle 6.2, and then we see the moon 66.5, same azimuth angle. So we'll look at that right now. Okay. So they've got the same azimuth angle. So, the sun is above the moon, but the moon's below it. Here is the different altitude angles, okay, that we see. And then again, the moon is below the sun. So same thing. If it's a mass, we should be able to see it, especially with some kind of reflection from the sun, because the moon isn't perfectly blocking the sun like they say.
Yeah.
Yep. And so now this is the third one. We're getting pretty far south. So you'll see the altitude angle go a lot less because we're getting farther away, So now we're down at -30 degrees latitude. So, and you can see the altitudes went down, but the azimuth angle is pretty much the same, but the altitude angles went down. Again, the moon's below the sun. See that? It becomes logical after what you see it. So on the left, the sun and the moon are on the same azimuth, but the moon is below the sun. In the middle here with the altitude angles, we can see that the moon is still below the sun. And then that person viewing from that location, that the moon is below the sun. So bottom line is this: you can do this any other location except for where it's at Waco, Texas. Any other place you do that, the altitude and azimuth angles will not line up perfectly, which means any other place where the sun's lit in that day, you should be able to see the moon if it's a mass, but nobody does. Okay. So this next thing is like the summary for what we just learned and went through true geometry for Waco, Texas. So that yellow line that I've got going around the whole circle there, right? Only that location in Waco, Texas has it geometrically, the moon geometrically in front of the sun, both azimuth and altitude. But all the other locations inside that yellow line, everybody else should be able to see the moon because it's not going to be aligned up with the sun, but we don't. So again, in the summary of this is, a total solar eclipse occurs only at Waco, Texas, and locations roughly 60 miles north and south of the Waco area at this date and time, because the sun and moon's altitude and azimuth angles are exactly the same, and the moon geometrically, quote, appears to be perfectly aligned in front of the sun to block the sun and the sun's light. However, on this same date and time, at all other latitude and longitude locations / coordinates inside the yellow lines, the sun and moon's altitude and azimuth angles are not the same. And if the moon is a solid mass, then the moon should be visible at all other latitude and longitude locations / coordinates, especially if the sun's lighting it up, right? That's what they say.
Mm-hmm.
During a new moon, we never observe or see the moon because there's no light in the moon. The moon is invisible. So that's the first example. We're going to go through the other three. I'm going to go quicker because it's the same process, but there might be some locations that people are watching that they'll see pop up, and you can take a look at that specifically later on. So we're going to do the same thing for Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm going to gather the latitude and longitude and the elevation. Okay. Check that data, go into the solar eclipse computer and come out with what they say. And you'll see that it says sun's altitude is 53 and the sun's azimuth is 215.1. I'll verify that again on the sun and moon's altitude and azimuth angles. And here we go again. Now into the data, I've already done this. Like I said, you can put these inputs in there, you can see it pop up. You can find it. You have to go to that latitude and longitude and look for the time, and it'll be there. Okay. So the sun and the moon have the same altitude and azimuth angles, just like, it has to happen to make it appear that the moon's blocking the sun. and we do the geometric angles for that particular time, and we see that they're lined up, and that the view from Indianapolis, Indiana, for sure, the moon is exactly geometrically in front of the sun. Okay. Has anybody got any questions, Josh, or are they pretty good?
Yeah, I've been trying to look here and there for questions. I haven't seen any
Okay.
so far. There may be like vocabulary words. I think that'd probably be the biggest thing. Like, what's an azimuth angle? You know, like
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
people don't use if they're not into architecture, you know, or
Yeah. Well, that's basically, those are, if people, navigators. I mean, obviously,
yeah,
back in day, in the Hebrew days where they were doing navigation, they would use azimuth and altitude angles to know where the sun and moon are. You know, basically, they would do their data, because the way Yahweh designed the circular level plane Earth is beautiful. He used his geometric laws in the physical world to help mankind be able to navigate. You know,
yeah,
it's beautiful. So yeah, I understand. I mean, there's some other videos that I have in my Geotruth channel that goes in more detail to explain these things a little bit more. So they might want to go there. I just didn't do it here because it takes a long time. I mean, it took me over a year and a half to figure all this out, you know. And it's like, but we're going to just keep going through here, and we'll see. It's always the same thing with the 4 locations.
yeah,
So I'm just going to go through here. You know, it's going to show again exactly where the sun is. I have to locate where the sun and moon are on the circular level plane map by looking for their locations with the latitude and longitude coordinates. When people use their phones on the maps, you can always, on there, you'll see the GPS coordinates. That's basically, and that's ground positioning system, by the way, not global. You know,
yeah,
yep. So that's where these come from. So again, we're locating where the sun is, and we're locating now where the moon is through the data, and this verifies that. You know, again, verifies the elevation. The elevation of the sun and moon are always going to be the same. The sun's 45 miles above the moon. They're always at those 2 altitude elevations above sea level that you'll see. So here we go. Now I've located on the Gleason's map. And so you can see the sun and moon, by the way, are moving together. I'll just let you know, the sun moved, and again, it's all about a circle. They're 360 degrees in a circle. For the sun to go around, circle the earth one rotation, it's 360 degrees, and that's one day for 24 hours. So when you and 360 degrees has 1,440 minutes, okay, in a day, okay? And then now you can figure out that the sun moves 4 minutes per degree. It moves 4 minutes of time per degree of longitude. Again, it's getting into some weeds. The moon goes slower. It goes 4.14 degrees per minutes per degree. That's how the cycle happens. The lunar cycle is based on the sun moving faster than the moon. They both are rotating clockwise, circularly, but it takes the sun 29.5 days to lap the moon one time, okay? Because the sun is moving faster than the moon every time, all the time. Matter of fact, people can actually observe this if they want to. Each day, if they go out, like when we have the new moon, start it from the new moon because the moon is invisible. The next day, the sun will be about 12 degrees farther clockwise, 12 degrees farther clockwise in the sky than the moon. Of course, it really takes about 3 or 4 days for the moon to start lighting up where you can see it. But every day, the sun's moving 12 degrees farther clockwise than the sun's moving 12 degrees farther clockwise than the moon. And that's what you can see as it keeps getting farther away. And then you can see, oh, it's over there farther away. The moon got brighter. And it's a quarter moon. It's 90 degrees away from the moon. when the sun's 180 degrees away from the moon, it's like halfway across the circular level plane, it's a full moon. And when the sun starts catching up to the quarter moon, the sun's going to have a quarter moon, and it's going to be on the side facing the sun. So because it's always going to be on the side facing the sun. And when the sun gets closer to the moon and it laps it after 29.5 days, the moon loses its light. But that is in great detail also in my playlist for the lunar cycle, the full moon's lunar cycle. So here's a view again, Indianapolis, Indiana. It's perfectly lined up for them it looks like the moon is blocking the sun. Then we're going to do those same 3 locations. The first one's going to be at the equator, okay? And then I'm just going to kind of move through these because people get the idea. But you can see the main thing is the altitude angles are different now for the sun and moon. So it clearly shows the moon is below the sun. And then, this is the view again. I think the main thing for us to look at now would be the right view, where that's the actual view that the observer would see the moon below the sun there. Okay. Yep. And then we're going to go to point number 2, which is 15 degrees south, 15 degrees latitude south. And we see now the moon's about 1 degree altitude angle below them. The sun is 1 degree altitude angle above the moon. So they're not in the same lineup. And then we see the moon below the sun. Okay. This consistently happens. Point 3, we're 30 degrees latitude south. You can see the altitude angle. The sun is still higher than the moon. And then we do see though, the farther out we go, like I said, to the south latitude, the sun and the moon are coming down in the altitude in the sky because we're getting farther away from it. Then the moon should be visible if it's a mass at all 3 locations south of where the sun and the moon are. And again, here we go with that circular, the yellow line going all the way around. That is all those areas around there. Anybody should be able to see the moon, that if it's a mass, visible to see the moon during that day, but we don't. Okay. Now we're going to go to Erie, Pennsylvania. We're going, because as the sun moves clockwise, and the moon does go with it, circular west, it's basically causing that eclipse, quote, the solar event, to go northeast. Okay, that's where it geometrically lines up where the moon's in front of the sun perfectly. So we're getting the data for Erie, Pennsylvania. I'm checking it out. You find out there's the altitude angle 47 and the azimuth angle 224.9. Then we get into the sun and moon's data to see where they line up. And again, they perfectly line up. This is just what they do. They use this data to prove that it's geometrically lined up perfectly, but it's being used for another purpose. And there's the data points. And again, if we look over to the right here, the view from Erie, Pennsylvania would be the moon is exactly geometrically in front of the sun. The reason I'm doing the 4 data points is it's, again, consistent. We're doing testing through observation, through geometry and observation, and it's showing us the truth. Okay. And I'll just go through here. Now we're going to locate the sun. This tells me where it's at on the circular level plane. Exact same information as far as its elevation. This is the moon. Exact same information as far as its elevation, but it tells me where it's located on the Earth. And there we go. So you can see it makes sense because now, the sun and moon, by the way, the sun is still on, it doesn't move very far so just to let people know, the sun, for seasons, the sun's traveling north and south to the different latitude lines. We just had the spring equinox last Tuesday. So that's when it crossed over the equator. Now it's moving north. That's why it's north of the equator. And it's going to continue to move north till it hits the Tropic of Cancer, which is the summer solstice. And it's going to turn around and come back south. And then in the fall, hit the equator and keep going south till the winter solstice and hit the Tropic of Capricorn, and then come back to the equator. So the sun is always moving in a circular clockwise pattern. At the same time, it's moving a little bit north and south each day. Matter of fact, knowing that in a 1 year cycle, you know how much latitude it moves, we know the miles. I know how many miles it moves roughly a day. On the average, it could be faster or slower than other times. I haven't gone that far in going to that detailed research, but the average would be about 17 miles north or south. And right now it's going about 17 miles south. I mean, yes, north now, going 17 miles north. So when you look at the latitude locations, the sun right now is not really moving much at all. I think it was 7.59 and 7.6. So, because it's not moving that much here, you know, as it's going around. It's only 2 or 3 hours, or a couple of hours when this happens at this duration. So that's where it's at. Then we're going to do the observation again, looking south. And so we look south at the latitude equator line. We're seeing that the altitude angles don't match up, which means the moon will now be exposed below the sun. And it is. On that right view, the moon is below the sun easily. Because what's also happening is, as the sun goes and rotates clockwise, the other, quote, solar events or eclipses are occurring farther north. So the sun, you know, the altitude angle for the sun and moon, even at where it's going to be the eclipse, the event, that altitude angle for both the moon and the sun are going down as well. Now we're seeing it south as well. So now we're going to do the second point and minus 15 degrees latitude, and you can see again the sun is still now above the moon. It's going to expose the moon below, and there it is on that view from that location. The right view, the moon is below the sun, should be visible. Then the third one, altitude angles, or moon's below the sun, should be able to see it. And you can see now we're getting farther south at the, because when you see these altitude angle views each time, you can see the sun was up a lot, the sun and moon was up higher, but the farther south we go, it comes down, which makes sense. You know, we're farther away from it, so the altitude of both the sun and the moon are going down. And then we've got, again, this yellow circle. It shows any other location during that time where Erie, Pennsylvania is experiencing, you know, the sun being blocked, where the moon actually is right in front of the sun. That could be used to say that it's blocking the sun. That's the only location that could happen. Everywhere else, people should see the moon, but they don't. One more location is going to be Sherbrooke, Canada. So we're way farther north now. And, you know, each time we do this, I didn't talk about the time, but the time's getting later, right? Obviously, because the sun and moon are rotating clockwise and time's moving on. So we pull the data from Solar Eclipse Computer. We get that altitude and azimuth here. And we bring it down to verify it where the actual sun and moon are. We get the same altitude and azimuth angles to make it geometrically appear the moon's directly in front of the sun. And then you can see, because we're so far north now, even the altitude angles are low. But, you know, that picture of the view from Sherbrooke, Canada, the moon is exactly geometrically in front of the sun. And we're going to locate where the sun is on this circular level plane map. Sun's locations, and then the moon. And you can see one thing I didn't mention, but you can tell on a new moon, the moon always gets so close to the sun. They're very close, extremely close. That's, you know, you can see a new moon, the moon and sun are the closest together. It's the moon that moves around. It's very interesting. I should do a quick video on that. But obviously when the moon, when it's a full moon, the sun and moon are 180 degrees apart on a circular level plane map, because that's when the moon gets its full charge. The farthest apart is when the moon is 100% light. But like in the quarter moons, the first quarter and the third quarter moon, the moon is either like in latitudes like as far south or north as 28 degrees. So the moon just moves around like crazy. But when it comes for the moon comes right near the sun, very, very close. I mean, they're literally just miles apart. So that shows us where it's at. And we're going to do the 3 points on the equator. So again, right off the bat, the sun is going to be above the moon now, exposing the moon below the sun. And there we see it here on that right view. That's the view from that longitude equator location. We're going to go to point 2, which is going to be the second point is minus 15 degrees latitude. Altitude angles different. The moon is below the sun. You see it exposed. Like I said, if that's the case, the sun should be shining that moon, part of it. Third point, minus 30 degrees latitude. Moon is below the sun altitude-wise. And here you see it there. So again, this is where we see perfectly lined up for Sherbrooke, Quebec. But that whole area there, yellow area, everybody else should be able to see the moon, but they don't because it's invisible. So now I just want to go back and do a quick video. Is that, Josh? Can I do that, Josh, or do you need to do it?
Oh, the video? Let me see. Is it added to the stage? Or do you want me to find the links you sent me?
No, I loaded it up, so it should be right there. It's basically, I think it's just the one video that I loaded up.
Oh, okay. Is this it right here? Hold on. Let me remove this one.
Yeah. It just shows, the sequence of how the sun's moving so people can see, what's happening as time moves on that day. There we go. Yeah.
There we go.
There you go. See? That's what's happening during the day. That pretty much goes along with a line that you see, they show you with the path, right? Just kind of quick summary. So that was it. So
that makes a lot of sense on a flat Earth model. Someone said they can't see the video.
Oh, really?
Were y'all able to see it, Tyler? Thanks that.
Huh.
Is anybody able to see the video? I saw it. It pulled up on my screen. Okay, they said I saw it playing.
Okay. All right. Cool. So we just got to get back to the presentation that it was on, the other one.
There you go.
There we go. Thanks. So we just did that. So here's the results for the solar event. NASA/Mainstream Science's definition of a, quote, solar eclipse states, the solar eclipse occurs when the moon passes between Earth and the sun, thereby obscuring the view of the sun from a small part of the Earth, totally or partially, such as alignment occurs approximately every 6 months during the eclipse season in its new moon phase. NASA and Mainstream Science state the moon is a mass, and a solar eclipse that only occurs during a new moon, where the moon obscures a view of the sun on a small part of the Earth. Since NASA and Mainstream Science state the moon is a mass, then the moon should be visible at all other locations on the Earth during a solar eclipse where the moon is not obscuring the sun. Using the navigational data from the United States Naval Observatory on April 8, 2024, the sun and moon's altitude angle and azimuth angles are exactly the same at these 4 locations at the time shown: Waco, Texas, Indianapolis, Indiana, Erie, Pennsylvania, Sherbrooke, Quebec. This causes the moon to geometrically appear to be in front of the sun to block the sun and the sun's light. The width of the total solar eclipse path at these locations are very narrow, being roughly 60 miles north or south. This is because the altitude angle and azimuth angle of the sun and moon are exactly the same, only when within the narrow total eclipse path width of roughly 120 miles. Okay. Using the navigational data from the United States Naval Observatory on April 8th, 2024, the sun and moon's altitude angle and azimuth angle were determined at 3 latitude locations south, 0, -15, and -30 of the sun and moon's locations at the time shown at Waco, Indianapolis, Erie, Pennsylvania, and Sherbrooke. The sun and moon's altitude and azimuth angles are not the same, resulting in the moon being below the sun. If the moon is a mass, then the moon should be visible at all other locations on the Earth, where the sun and the moon's altitude angle and azimuth angle are not the same. However, no one ever observes or sees the moon during a new moon. This is what we're learning from this. So the conclusions: the moon is a light and not a mass. During a new moon, the moon has no light and is invisible. It is impossible for the moon to ever block the sun or the sun's light. Quote, solar eclipses have been recorded and observed over thousands of years. During a solar eclipse, a black orb phenomena is observed moving in front of the sun, posing as the moon. So we're going to go through some Yahweh scriptures here because it tells us that the sun and moon are lights. They're not masses. Genesis 1:14-19. Josh, do you mind reading so I can get a drink of water?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Thanks.
So Genesis, love going back to Genesis, talking about the second day of creation and beyond, where he spent that entire day making the firmament. And so Genesis 14-19 says, Then God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, or appointed times, and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. Then God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also, and God set them in the firmament of the heavens. So that structure he spent the entire second day of creation making, it wasn't atmosphere. He didn't put stars in the atmosphere. He set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth and to rule over the day and over the night and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So that evening and the morning were the fourth day.
Yeah.
And so Jubilees chapter 2 it's repeating the creation account. I really like, if you really love the creation account, go to Jubilees and look at how it parallels Genesis. It's amazing, and it gives you some little extra details. And it says here, and on the fourth day, he, Yahuwah, the Almighty, created the sun and the moon and the stars and set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon all the earth and to rule over the day and the night and divide the light from the darkness. And God appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days and for Sabbaths and for months and for feasts and for years and for Sabbaths of years and for jubilees and for all seasons of the years. And it divideth the light from the darkness, and for prosperity, that all things may prosper which shoot and grow on the earth. These three kinds he made on the fourth day. So that sun that we're allegedly going around, according to them, didn't exist when he made earth, didn't exist when he was forming things and putting things in the water. This was something that happened on the fourth day.
Right. So the sun always rules the day and the moon always rules the night. And the word eclipse is never really mentioned in any of Almighty God's scriptures. I've researched it. I can't find it. So go to the next slide. So we're going to get into Enoch, the Almighty God's laws of the sun and moon in chapter 41 of 1st Enoch. 1st Enoch 41:5. And I saw the chambers of the sun and the moon, where they go out and where they return. and their glorious return, and how one is more honored than the other is, and their magnificent course, their course is there, right? And how they do not leave their course, neither adding nor subtracting from their course, and how they keep faith in one another, observing their oath. 1st Enoch 41:6. And the sun goes out first and completes its journey at the command of the Lord of the spirits, and his name endures forever and ever. Enoch, 1st Enoch 41:7. And after this is the hidden and visible path of the moon, and it travels the course of its journey in that place by day and by night. One stands opposite the other in front of the Lord of the spirits, and they give thanks and sing praise and do not rest, because their thanksgiving is like rest to them. The moon's path is described in 1st Enoch 41:7 as hidden and invisible. I mean, hidden and visible. Always hidden during a new moon phase, and always visible during all other moon phases at various levels of illumination. That's the first time I kind of picked that up in 41:7.
Oh,
After this
wow.
is the hidden and
Yeah.
visible path of the moon. So that tells you that when it loses its light, it's hidden.
Wow.
So the moon never interferes with the sun. Therefore, all quote solar eclipse / events throughout history are huge lies and deceptions. Who created the solar eclipse lies and deceptions? What is the reason for the solar eclipse lies and deceptions? When did the solar eclipse lies and deceptions begin in history? How physically is the solar eclipse lies and deceptions accomplished? We'll talk about that tomorrow night in part 2, because we're
Heck
getting up
yeah.
there in time. But
Yeah.
the next part 2 is going to talk about history and things like that, delving into things that are really interesting.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I mean, hearing, about the end times, the sun and the moon going dark and things happening, like the moon not giving us light. Is that really just talking about a new moon phase? What's that talking about?
Right.
Is it a solar eclipse when it went dark when Yeshua was on the
Mhm.
cross? Was the timing like it is now,
Right.
where it happened at that exact appointed time? Or did the sun really literally go dark? We know it literally stood still with Joshua. And so it wasn't the earth standing still, it was the sun
Right.
standing still and the moon as well. And so I think it's so cool seeing these things and looking at the little visuals you had. That was a lot of work. And let me remove this from full screen layout. I was just looking at these paths. Somebody shared this picture yesterday,
Right.
and I was looking at all these paths of these eclipse shadows, and it's hard for me to visualize the heliocentric model doing any of this.
Right.
And look how thick they are. I mean, they're so thin. They're like teeny tiny,
Exactly.
hairline marks on a globe. If you would imagine that moon being so massive, its shadow would be much bigger. But where you get to where the firmament's closer to the world, well, I believe it is. It may not be, but where I believe the firmament's closer to the world, you would think, when you bring your hand closer to a light source, the shadow gets bigger. When you're like, you can block out your entire room just by putting your hand
Mhm.
next to the light bulb. The
Right.
further away you get, the smaller your shadow gets. And so I think that's cool seeing that with the biblical Earth model on a map. Like, this isn't like a flat Earth map,
Right.
but seeing those shadows get massive the further south you go, it's pretty
Mhm.
cool. They get really tiny up there when you go north.
Well, and that's because of the that's because of the curvature of the ball down there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this is something I thought was cool too, with the moon's diameter being allegedly what they claim to over 2,000 miles, and its shadow is usually 100 miles or less.
Right.
But when we have a lunar eclipse, when there's the or alleged globe Earth passing in between, um, or passing between the moon and the sun and causing that shadow, our shadow is far greater. Because their shadow is like 1/22nd of the moon's actual size.
Right.
With Earth, it's like, oh, that doesn't apply to the Earth. Its
Right.
shadow is far greater. If you were to match a spherical object up to that
Yep.
curved line there, it'd be far greater. So I think it's just the math doesn't add up, even just with their
No.
shadow sizes. The things you're saying make way more sense than what we're seeing.
Well, the other thing too is, you know, I didn't realize until I got to the navigational data how consistent it is. Like
Yeah.
really the elevation of the sun and the moon. Now it could be a perspective, but still, it's used for and I'll talk about perspective, cone of perspective tomorrow, which is going to play into how the lies of deceptions occur with the cone of perspective of what you
Yeah.
look at. But when you see, if the bottom line is that the Earth is a circular level plane, well, and for the sun and moon to be the same size all the time, they got to be rotating at the same elevation all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they're going to be, and they're not going to look the same. And they're so close together. It's almost now in my mind, it's like, well, we can never have a lunar eclipse because the sun and the moon are always above the Earth.
Yeah.
They're never going to be, and I talk about that as well in some other videos.
Yeah.
So,
The lunar eclipse makes sense to me with the firmament the way it is. If you have these two light sources on opposite sides, they're electrically charged, and like they talk about with studying the ionosphere, it's this electrically charged area, and so they're looking at how it changes during the shadowy part. Like, why don't they do that at night? Because literally it's the same thing.
right.
Just study when it goes from daylight to dark, and they're like, no, we're going to wait until there's a shadow area and over the Earth. And I don't know where all their rocket parts are going to fall. If they're usually they do them out over Point Nemo or out over the ocean when they drop these things. But if they're doing it over land, where are they going to drop their different stages and all of that? Could be interesting. They'll try to do it over some remote place, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Well, that and the lunar eclipse, I think one time I was videoing it, and it was because they occur different ways. Sometimes the lunar eclipse will happen when the sun is setting and the moon's coming up, or vice versa, right? It depends on what's happening. And one of those times, the light on the moon, because I think it's basically some special sign that we get from Yah, because it's actually the moon's going through a phase of, like you said, it does a unique light phase, and then it gets back to normal. Well, the light was on the wrong side of the sun. It was happening opposite the sun on that side of it, right? So well, how can that be?
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with charges. Someone told me this back in the early days. They're like, you should know that its charge is canceling out, because like Enoch, I think as Enoch says, the moon gets its charge from the sun.
Right.
It's light. It's not like essentially just reflecting the light. It's kind of like those old glow in the dark toys we would get that you would expose them to light, and they would be bright once you brought them into the dark, but only if you expose them to a light. So it's very similar. Like it's getting that charge, which makes sense why we have all these electrical charge properties. The higher you get, the higher that charge is, the more of an electrical current there is up above us. And you could test that out. People test that out all the time. And I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. The physical science part, because I'm more of a life science biology person, and I like the intelligent design. And the physical stuff, like you're talking about, it's impressive. I would love for my mind to be able to wrap around all of that a little better, because the physical science aspect is something I never was extremely fascinated with until flat Earth, until the true Earth model. Started investigating that, and I started going out and looking at the shadows and how they move when the sun's setting versus, on a globe versus a biblical Earth model.
Right. Yeah. Some of my videos talk about, the electromagnetic relationship. It's in Enoch. It tells you in Enoch, what's happening electromagnetically.
Yeah.
Yeah. When the sun and the moon are together, the moon has got no charge. As soon as the sun gets away, it starts to charge, fully charged, farther away, and then it loses it again.
Yeah.
And that makes sense because, I did one of those tests about a year and a half ago where it was a full moon. And I've got the basically infrared thermometer, and did the shadow, straight direct light from the moon, and then the shadow. And the straight light, direct light from the moon is cooler than in the shadow. So it tells you it's a negative charge. It's a negative charge.
That's pretty cool. A lot of people always ask me, like, why don't we send those balloons up and go above the atmosphere, what we call atmosphere, and just take a picture of the firmament? And it reminds me of that verse, because when you do, it's weird. When you get above it, you should be able to just look away and kind of like, block out the brightness from the ground beneath us, reflecting off that sunlight. But there's a verse in Isaiah that says, I clothe the heavens with blackness, and I make sackcloth their covering. And so you have this cloaking effect. So it's like the firmament, it looks like what was this? Neil Armstrong said, it's a deep black, when you're above, when you go higher, it's not until the sun gets blocked out that you can see it. And so even like when the eclipse happens, you can start to see stars. But when the sun's out, it's weird. It's like it's this one-way see-through mirror effect where you can't see anything. It's like sheer blackness. And even increasing elevation doesn't make the stars clearer usually, which is weird. You would think that would be the case. Where's that video slide I wanted? But for people that are going to watch the eclipse, if you don't see part 2, or for whatever reason you have never heard of these things, instead of just looking up at the sky, there's an effect caused by the firmament, and they call it shadow bands. And these shadow bands, or shadow, I guess they look like bars moving across the ground. When you have something moving, near the firmament, I think that's what's causing that effect, is you have these waves that look like bars moving across the ground. So you would need to set up a surface on the ground and just have an extra camera set up filming these things. And I think it happens when you're closer to totality, if you're in one of those locations. And so the closer you get, the more intense these things become. And you see these waves, this phenomenon. People have filmed them now. There's videos. We did a video about it, and that video is in the description. Be looking at things like that. Don't, while you're looking up, have a extra camera pointed down at a surface. You don't want the surface to be too bright white. Kind of needs to be a little darker, have a little bit of gray in there, so it's not washing out with the exposure, the imagery you're seeing. And so, it's interesting that it's called shadow band. Somebody said, yeah, we know that's a phenomenon. Yeah, being shadow band is a phenomenon, but shadow bands are a different phenomenon that I didn't learn about until a few years ago. And I thought, man, how have I never heard of that? We watched the 2017 eclipse. I would have loved to have been filming that as well, because it's a property, I believe, of the firmament with those waves moving, similar to how when you watch the lightning sprites and you see those waves, like there's something to the surface right below the firmament. It's like it's got fluid properties when you look at it. I think that's one thing to be looking out for, as well as the Elias effect with pendulums. But I don't know. I've never really gotten into the pendulums or making them and doing all that. But if you do them during an eclipse, they change their rotation by like 13 degrees within an hour or something. It's very interesting how it works. I have to go back. Let me see if I have that information in here. Where's it at? That's allegedly somebody's photo from like Antarctica that they stitched together. Let me see if I can find the Elias effect stuff. I think it's up higher. Elias effect. There it is. It says the solar eclipse causes a pendulum to rotate 13.5 degrees every 14 minutes instead of 15 degrees per hour. That is a massive difference. So usually within an hour, 15-degree rotation, but 14 minutes, it's going to rotate 13.5. So it almost does what it does in an hour just in 14 minutes during a solar eclipse. And so this is something that proves it's what's above us moving. If there's anything affecting a pendulum, it's not a rotating globe. It's that, and that's further proven when they went to the South Pole, the alleged South Pole, and did a pendulum. It went the wrong direction the first time they did it. And so they had to rig their experiment to make it go the right direction. Took them a lot of tries, and that shouldn't be the case with a giant spherical object rotating beneath you. It should go the right direction every time, and it shouldn't have to be tweaked here and there and drop it a certain way. It should actually, just like when they do it in a plane, they put pendulums in planes and they'll fly in a circle and the plane will rotate underneath the pendulum. Okay. And so that's kind of like the same mechanism. That's how it's supposed to work with the globe. But yeah, we don't live on a moving surface whatsoever. And so the Elias effect, I think, is another good one. If you're good with pendulums or you have a pendulum just made, try it out, see what happens, do a time lapse of it during the eclipse. I think there's a lot of fun things we could do, kind of like the math you've already done to prove the geocentric model. And it's becoming easier as more people are working on it. The sight distance records, all the different things piling up. It's beyond belief.
By the way, I'll be doing a presentation with Ken on Friday about the calendar, but there's a lot of things I did in there too. And I'm going to show how the sun actually rotates in the different seasons, what its light capability is. And when I did that, I didn't see this. You should look at it on your Gleason's map. Pull it up. In the winter, what says December solstice, it says it tells you that sun has gone south to basically the Tropic of Capricorn, which means it should light up all of Antarctica, all the way to the edge of where the firmament is, right?
Yeah.
But it says from 80 degrees south, there's no sunlight, there's darkness. So that's 690 miles. When you look at it, that's distance of 690 miles. And that's when the sun is closest to that edge. So I'm thinking there's something going on with the firmament starting to curve where the sun doesn't hit it there.
Yeah.
Because at minus 80 degrees south, it doesn't ever get sun there.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
That is interesting.
And I figure, you know what? I think the navigators back then, were the ones that basically did their ships there, and they were trying to walk as far south as they could. And they got to a point where there's no more light. We got to turn around.
Yeah.
We'll just say we see ice, but we can't keep going to the edge. I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I love that map. Somebody gave me the book. The guy that made the Gleason map is the Bible from Heaven. Bible from Heaven is the Earth of Globe. I think it was Mike from Flat Earth Archives on Facebook. If you've never seen Flat Earth Archives on Facebook, you need to go there, check out Mike and his work. Yeah, he gave me that book, and I thought, man, this is such a good book. There's so many good quotes in here. I still haven't read it all, but such a genius, the guy that made the Gleason map. And I was having a meetup, and a person came to me, shook my hand, and he said, I just want to let you know my testimony. He said, I was an atheist, devout atheist, until I came across that book, this book right here. And he had it with him. And he said, I came across that book, and he said, reading that and then going in and testing this stuff out about the earth is what brought him to the Most High. And I'm like, wow, how cool is that? An old book from way back when, still bringing souls in.
Right.
So yeah, work doesn't go unnoticed. Things like this, people seeing and learning the math. It's a lot of work that George has gone through putting this stuff together. If you've never done studies and compiled things and put things together, especially with the math, my brain was hurting. It was reminding me of math class.
I know, that's right.
But it's so cool. I could start. I'm visual, and so you have the visuals. If you just had numbers and letters like my evil math teachers used to do, it would have been a lot worse. But that was.
I was actually going to try to do something with the annular solar eclipse back in October. I didn't have time. I thought I want to do something before people see it to let them know what the truth is. And I mean, literally, I'm hours and hours and hours. I mean, my wife Teresa didn't see me like maybe for dinner,
Yeah.
And then I got it done. It's like I got to find out who would be willing to do it. And I just prayed, I sent it to you. I thought, Lord, if it's going to happen, it can happen. And I'm just thankful that you were willing to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's good. I think a lot of people are learning, and it's great to share other people's research, and especially humble people. That's what I don't do that with a lot of people, but I know George, and we do our word studies together now, and so he's a good humble person, not somebody out there to be puffed up in knowledge and look at what I know and everyone else is ignorant for not seeing this. It's a humble approach, and that's what it takes with this truth, to be humble, plant seeds, and you'll see the fruits of that in time. But I appreciate you.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead. I'm good.
Yeah, tomorrow we're going to get deep into history, from creation on forward, because we have to answer these questions. And I'll just say that in the research, looking back in history, when quote solar eclipses started to happen, it didn't happen in the Egyptian time, which you thought it would have, because they were worshiping the sun, right?
Yeah.
They actually set a lot of their structures in alignment with the sun. But you cannot find anything in history of Egyptians recording an eclipse.
Yeah.
So it didn't happen back then. It happened sometime after that. So we'll get into that tomorrow.
Okay. That's interesting. I look forward to learning about that stuff, because I'm really seeing what they're doing with they actually use this serpent deity mission that they're going to have during the day of the eclipse, how that plays into things, because it was literally warring against their sun god Ra, so it's like, and now they're bringing it back, the good old NASA, the trustworthy NASA. And, people say it's a religion that we have and we're believing a religion, but look at what they name all their missions after.
Exactly.
It's demonic entities, the fallen, their offspring, the Nephilim.
Yep.
You know, they were rebranded as these gods of old and all of that and mythology, but they still worship these sun gods. They name their missions after them. They're deceiving the world about what we live on under the name of Apollo, you know, the Apollo missions. And
Yep.
it's so dark, but they're always smiling. So it's like they can't be that bad. They're all smiling, happy people, even though they've been locked in this container above us. It's like essentially a submarine for months, and it's like they're just happy all the time.
Right.
Makes
Well,
no
I think
sense.
bottom line is NASA's gone nowhere for 50 years, right? They've
Yeah.
gone nowhere.
Yeah. And we're paying for it. I'm like, man, I wish I didn't. It's sad giving up 31% of your paycheck knowing some of it's going to NASA and even
Right.
SpaceX now. They make all this money. And I'm like, how are they making money? They're not selling anything. Oh, wait, it's coming from us. You know, like it's
Right.
coming directly from us. They partnered with NASA. They're not their own private things. And you think, oh, well, everyone's going to space now is what they say. They even have Elon Musk doing it. And when you look at what does he do? Does he name his things after these deities? Well, he's got the Dragon capsule. You know, it's
Right.
literally named Dragon. They're sending a dragon up there. And
Yep.
so, yeah, it's not biblical people. I mean, the guy literally wears the soldier of Satan outfit in his profile picture for Twitter,
Yeah.
or at least he used to. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And then we were talking about, intuitive machines. I've looked into that company, and that's just a front for NASA. Again, they've created a supposedly private company, but they're part of the government.
Yeah.
The ones that put on a lunar lander, a more, a better lunar lander, but it fell over.
Yep. It just tipped right over. Yeah. They didn't account for the moon's rotation of like 11 miles per hour. You know, it's like landing on a treadmill.
Yep.
They forgot to factor that in.
And they're just sitting there in their rooms and they go, "Oh, it landed." It's like they didn't even show a graphic,
Yeah.
CGI. They didn't see. It's like,
Oh, somebody, Kelly, his name's Kelly. I talked to. He sent me a video, and this guy found an old reel, and he's into restoring. He's a YouTuber that restores these old reels of tapes and plays them. You know, NASA lost the technology to play them back. This
right.
guy has the technology, and he
Ah,
plays the. He found in the actual original container the moon landing where somebody had filmed it, and he restores it. I'm gonna have to find that from and
yeah,
send that link out, or even maybe do a video on it. Because I
yeah,
thought when they played it, they were just watching live footage, and I'm always like, you know what? We're watching all these cartoons and animations. Well, when it's showing the moon landing, that's what they were doing. They were showing these animations of what was happening, and
yep.
I'm like, so they were watching the same exact animations like we do now. I thought it was more of it was filmed live and being broadcast back, but no, they actually had the same tricks they do now. For
Um,
most of it, there was some of it broadcast live. They were, in a
yeah.
Zoom call with the moon back before the internet was invented.
I
So
mean,
yeah,
they have so much technology, I mean, when you talk about artificial intelligence, we know that's actually demons and unclean spirits.
yeah,
Where'd they come from? They came from angels. Well,
hmm
angels know how to use the technology of the ether. I mean, they're spirit, and then they show up flesh. They know all this energy, vibration, frequency. They know the technology, and that's what they're using on humanity. You know.
yeah, yeah. It's weird. I was looking into you talking about AI being demonic. You know the good old movie Terminator. It
Yep.
was like AI takes over, and
Right.
it was
Exactly.
called Skynet. And I just at work one day on my break I saw a video about the rise of like artificial intelligence, and they were talking about how they've been using it in like China, and it's basically it can scan everybody's face out walking down the road and be like, this is this person here. They're this old, they're happy, they're sad. Like it can collect all this data on these people. And
Right.
as they're looking at the screen and they're talking to the news guy about their program, I see in the top right of the screen it's called Skynet.
Oh
I was
my.
like,
Oh
hmm,
my.
what are the chances?
Right.
Skynet. I'm like,
Right.
this is like a movie script unfolding.
There's no
Um,
coincidences.
so I just thought that was hilarious. I was like, am I the only one to see this, that they're using
Wow.
Skynet and basically in China, which is going to just roll over here. But yeah,
Yeah.
very, very interesting how they put their plans out there in movies decades ago.
I
They
think the
just,
new phones, the new mobile phones, I think they're automatically putting AI on them now, aren't they?
oh yeah,
You
everything
know,
is, which is weird. Cars, phones,
I don't know if I want to get another one.
I know. About to go get my old flip phone back out, but they don't work. That's the thing. I remember going, well, I just want to use this phone that I've had, and they're like, well, you're going to have to upgrade because the towers, they're not going to work with the towers. Your old cheap, your phone that you want to save money on. Now you can't do that. I'm like, really? Just bring back the landline days. I miss the days of call somebody when you had the wireless phone, the cordless phone. That was a big deal back in the day.
Did you watch that movie, Leave the World Behind?
I've been somebody requested it or recommended it, and I haven't watched it.
Yeah, we watched it because we knew, it's going to program.
Yeah.
And they had the tanker that got basically hacked, this big oil tanker, and it ran aground right on the beach. So what happens in the harbor in Baltimore?
Wow. I didn't see that. I would have known what was going to happen. I'm seeing videos though, and I'm like, are they really recent where people are dating them as if it's within the last day or two of other barges hitting bridges? And I'm like, what's going on? Is this like this doesn't happen all the time? I mean, it probably happens more often than we think, but it's weird.
Not only that, but there's sequences in there when occasionally there's like a high frequency, almost like a boom.
Yeah.
Like a high energy weapon, direct energy weapon, and they're holding their ears, and so it's like, okay.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I want to say thank you too. Also to our moderators. We got Dennis and Debbie in the chat over here. Sharon. I never can say that properly. Tyler Porter. Thank you, brother. Always good to see your presence, sharing good videos and links in the description, in the comments, in the chat. So yeah, you guys are a blessing. All of our supporters, you guys are a much needed blessing. I'll be giving an update about creation standards soon, what I'm going to be doing next year. I sent out a survey, and so I'll talk about that separately. I'll make that its own video. But yeah, been a blessing, George. I appreciate it. I know you got a lot going on with your research. I'll let you get back to the wonderful family, and I'll go do the same.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's been fun, been educational, sitting back and taking notes. I know a lot of people are hungry for knowledge, and sitting back and taking notes so you can go back and replay the presentation. And
and if anybody has any questions or comments, just put them in, later, and I'll see them, and I'll try to answer them best I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we appreciate it, George. We appreciate your time, your work for the kingdom. We'll be rewarded. So yeah, it's going to be great when we all have that final reunion, what we're preparing for. But I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. You guys that have tuned in, we thank you very much. We've had more than usual. So this is an intriguing topic, to say the least. All right. Well, we will see you guys tomorrow night, same time, same channel.
Yes. Looking forward.